Keith David as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. In West Philadelphia, born and raised, on the playground is where I spent most of my days. Chilling out back and relaxing all cool, shooting some b-ball outside of the school. When a couple of guys who were up to no good started causing trouble in my neighborhood. I had one little fight, and my mom got scared. She said, "You're moving with your aunties and uncles in Bel-Air."
There's one thing that I should come a little bit clean on. I don't really have a format when it comes to deciding what games I want to review at a particular time. Generally, I'll look at my shelf, I'll pull something off of it, I'll contemplate it for a moment and say, yeah, this is a game that I can probably write down some words about and break down the pros and cons of it. But it hit me when I was watching episode 2 of my review show. I don't often like going back and watching myself, but I noticed that I had hit that tier list, and that was just a bit at the time, and I decided I don't really review enough really bad NES games, because some of those games are gold mines for material, but there was always one game in the back of my head that I kind of wanted to review, because playing it was such a pain in the neck, and that was Time Lord by Milton Bradley.
Now, before I begin talking about the game, this is another one of those cover arts that's just worth pointing out because it's a sight to behold. So, you've got a space knight, I think that's supposed to be you. There's another knight on horseback, Falcor over here, and according to that gold insignia, you've been sent on this mission by a knockoff United Earth Starfleet, I guess.
As previously mentioned, this is brought to you by Milton Bradley, who also produced Abadox, Captain Skyhawk, Jordan vs. Bird, and Marble Madness, to name a few. Meaning one or two things. Either the games are going to be incredibly difficult to control, or so painfully agonizing to the point that you'll cave in the bloodlust and shatter your NES into 1,000 pieces, chucking it into a wall.
I kid. I like Marble Madness. I don't like Jordan vs. Bird. Game's terrible. What is it with Michael Jordan and terrible video games?
Time Lord's premise is pretty straightforward. Gather 5 orbs in each location in order to proceed to the next level. You have a year's time limit to complete this based on the calendar down at the bottom of the screen in your HUD menu. Gather the 5 orbs, and you proceed. Yeah, but by the way, I love the digs that the Time Lord is wearing. I'd trade in the suit of armor and the plasma blade for a burnt sienna sleeveless top, matching leggings, and thigh-high boots. By the way, I love the music in this first stage here. It's pretty funky.
That's right, I'm wearing sunglasses over my regular glasses.
Level 1 in the space station, all of the orbs are in plain sight and can be completed in a matter of seconds. This is merely to ingratiate yourself to the game's design. Stage 2, the orbs are not quite in the open or are out of your reach, so there's various methods that you have to incur in order to make them appear or come towards you. This I actually like. The methods don't feel too similar in order to trigger success, and making each stage feel unique.
It gets a little cryptic in some regards, but not too overbearing for the most part. It's pretty straightforward, and you'll find yourself unlocking a lot of the orbs or the locations of them fairly quickly. It's a lot of the other aspects of Time Lord that brings up its shortcomings.
While cracking these puzzles are interesting in their own right, any aspect of the environment, obstacles, and enemies really isn't. Movement feels absolutely sluggish and awkward. Your forward walk speed is slow enough, but when moving at a y-axis from the game's perspective, you don't move in a straight line, but a bit at an angle. Hitboxes? What are those? The platform gap is wide enough to make, but only if you master the fidgety method of pressing diagonal up and right or down left. Walking, running, jumping, gaining any kind of momentum in preparation for your jumps in Time Lord is near impossible because the game doesn't consistently establish that. The first boss of the game is one of the doofiest dragons I've ever seen in the history of boss fights. This poor bastard looks like he's trying to work some stuff out. He doesn't even look like he wants to be here. No strategy at all, just pick a safe spot nearby the wall and hit him. Up next is the Wild West, and this is where Time Lord's difficulty is make or break, because it only gets harder from here. Same deal, discover as many ways to grab the orbs while avoiding enemies, picking up the shotgun, and it's time for the boss fight. This stereotype Mexican bandit with an incredibly swollen head. Why on earth are his dimensions totally different from mine? Okay, the trick is getting behind him and just plugging him full of shotgun shells.
Any day now!
Alright, after looking around on the internet, I think I might have an idea of what's happening, but I can't officially confirm this. Either A, the boss's health bars gradually regenerate if enough damage isn't done to them accumulatively, or 2, some of the weapons do absolutely nothing at all against certain bosses, because it turns out that this shotgun either doesn't deal enough damage or is completely impervious to that. Don't ask me why a shotgun does less damage than a handgun. That goes against the conceivable logic of upgrading weapons, but it means that picking up the shotgun is overall a complete waste of your time unless you have a knack for completionism.
It also doesn't help matters that his color changing, I can't tell if that's an indicative sign that you're doing damage or not, because the colors vaguely change, but it's hard to tell if that's indicating progress or not. So your guess is as good as mine. If you know anything, please in the comments let me know.
It's probably like a legit couple of minutes to take him down, but he goes down eventually. Congratulations, you've developed carpal tunnel. Mind you, as I mentioned earlier, there is a timer in this game, 1 calendar year to complete this game, so any time spent dawdling becomes incredibly paramount. The pirate ship is up next, and it's by this point that my neurons are being fried in my brain. There's one orb that's tucked underneath this platform here, and the best way I can explain how to get this is something I crudely called a V-jump, because you have to jump down, hold diagonal upright in just the right way to get up underneath this orb that's tucked up underneath this platform. It doesn't help matters that these barrels keep rolling and clipping away at your health. This orb is only attainable by circling around the map and descending through this opening. So now that you have that final orb, it's time for the boss battle. We fought a dragon, a bloated bandit who's made of Kevlar. What do you expect to fight on a pirate ship? A giant clam.
What, you're gonna question Time Lord? Of course giant clams ruled the seas back then. Why would you fight like a English Imperial warship, or like maybe even a pirate boss? No! Giant clams. Time Lord, it knows everything.
Stand as far away as possible and chuck daggers at the clam. Don't let it touch you because it does a boatload of damage! This was honestly about as far as I got. I played a little more of the next stage, which is like a World War I or World War II setting, but Time Lord was devouring my psyche by this point. And if I ever wanted to get this review finished, I could either continue to play this game and go completely insane, or just stop here because I think I've gathered enough I needed to say about it for a conclusion. Graphics-wise, Time Lord is serviceable, but ultimately uninspiring. The enemies aren't particularly unique, there are things in your way and involve a little in the way of being disposed of. The level design is okay, each time period looks different enough and conveys where you are. For games around this time, it looks okay, but lacks a bit of flair of many other NES titles. This came out in 1990, so why does it just seem so bland? 4 out of 5. The gameplay, as previously mentioned, also lacks interest. You have a standard attack and jump, but your weapons barely have any effect outside of boss-specific items. You need to use the throwing knife to defeat the clam, by the way. The slow, sluggish movement makes for an extra drag and a test of your patience. 2 out of 10. The music's not bad, they're pretty basic loops and they get stuck in your head, mostly through their simplistic composition. It's Time Lord's best quality to me, sound effects get the job done and are kinda satisfying, especially that wall kick. 6.5 out of 10. As far as fun factor and replay value, I like the idea of exploring and puzzle solving for progression. Time Lord just isn't rewarding enough in other key areas. With a little more polish, its shortcomings wouldn't be so glaring. Instead, it feels like a chore to remain interested in completing the levels.
So despite some flashes of promise, I'm afraid that there's too many elements that works against Time Lord to make it quality. It's frustrating, it's repetitive, and it is difficult. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a difficult NES game. I've beaten my fair share of difficult NES games, like Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse or Ninja Gaiden, but there was a drive to want to play those. Playing them was actually stimulating. There's nothing stimulating about Time Lord. It drags, it makes your brain swim, it hurts your hands. I can't declare a video game fun if it does that. I mean, maybe playing it on an alternate controller might spare that up, but that still doesn't make up for the game's glaring flaws. Overall, I give it a 3.5 out of 10. It's in the basement bin of Nintendo games, and probably winds up in the end being that forgotten can of Goya baby corn that's been sitting in your pantry cabinet since 2007. Well, that's all I've got to say about this. I was actually trying to come up with a bit for Time Lord. I was going to dress up like Marty McFly or Doc Brown or Doctor Who or something, and maybe do a thing where I would go back in time and stop myself from playing Time Lord. But I didn't feel like doing that. It's Time Lord. It doesn't deserve it. Bye!